guest. Rebecca Vitsmun is an autistic author from Lafayette, Louisiana, living with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, comorbid conditions, and congenital stationary night blindness. She graduated with honors with a degree in humanities from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Her new children's book, Eliza D's Universes, just received the Get It distinction on Kirkus Reviews, which has made her book now available for schools and libraries to order. Yay! The book depicts a girl with neurodivergence and physical conditions that are considered invisible disabilities, which are rarely depicted in literature. Rebecca includes educational information about these conditions in the book and has additionally created supplemental materials on her website for people with Eliza's conditions or without, to bring visibility to the invisible disabilities in the book. They are visible on every page of the book if you know what you are looking for as well in the illustrations, as well as a wealth of information, concisely written and with citations for those with conditions or anyone who would like to learn more. Rebecca is a humanist, embracing people of all religious and cultural backgrounds. However, she is most well known for accidentally, I guess, outing herself as an atheist to Wolf Blitzer after a tornado destroyed her home in Moore, Oklahoma in 2013. This exchange has been covered in many works, including Wendy Thomas Russell, citing her as an example of a paradigm shift on the first page of Relax, It's Just God. In 2015, Rebecca was the recipient of the Humanist Visionary Award through Foundation Beyond Belief for envisioning the first national humanist disaster recovery volunteer program, Humanist Disaster Recovery Teams, as well as the Atheist Impact Award recipient in 2016 through Atheist Community of Austin, hey, for developing and running that program, later renamed Disaster Resilience Teams and run by Go Humanity. She is the secretary of the board for Lyme TV, lobbies with Center for Lyme Action, volunteers through many local organizations, and recently earned a Washington State Emergency Worker Card through FEMA. So, wow, that is an awesome resume, Rebecca. Impressive. And welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. And let me see.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, we are so excited to have you. And this is actually, if I'm not mistaken, this month is a particularly important month to be talking about these issues, is it not?
Yeah, it's Disability Awareness Month.
Yes. So I am really excited that you were able to be here this week to talk with us about that. Do you do any other kind of talks or events for this month to kind of commemorate or bring awareness to disability?
I'm going to be tabling at the Global Conference for EDS in Philadelphia next week. And so
amazing.
I have that coming. And then I have I start my campaign again this week. And so I'll know what's coming up towards the end of the month, tomorrow after my meeting.
Wonderful. Okay, so for anybody that doesn't know, what is EDS?
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's actually a collection of different syndromes. There's like different types. I have hypermobile EDS, but there's 13 types, and they're constantly finding new ones. The researchers at the Norris lab are, finding more genes that, affect people, and everybody's, type affects them differently. But the hypermobile type has a lot of similar characteristics. So the type that I have, that hypermobile type, the way that you can tell is there's kind of a progression of the condition. It starts when you are young. You're like a contortionist, right? You're a contortionist, but you think it doesn't hurt while it's damaging your joints, and you don't start to feel that until you're kind of in your second decade of life, and then things start getting worse and worse over time, and you end up having significant numbers of injuries going into your 30s, and that's when a lot of us are getting diagnosed these days, especially because the criteria includes multiple dislocations, and so it's like you got to be really not doing very well before you're finally caught. But at that point, it's a genetic disorder. Like, you can look at your kids and there's a 50-50 chance of passing it along. So it's like, okay, that kid has it, obviously, and this kid doesn't, obviously. But that's good for the younger kids because they're going to get to know sooner, and you can start to protect their joints, and you can say, it's dangerous to move your joints beyond a normal range of motion. You don't feel it now, you'll feel it later. Yeah. And so, but comes with it, like there's that progression of like injuries, and then you're usually stiff by your 50s, but maybe things will start to get better now that we have like words and we can look at it, we can figure things out. But also, connective tissue is 80% of your eye. It's your skin. It's your it surrounds every organ, your GI system. Like there's a lot of places that genetic, anomaly affects for somebody with a condition like mine. So I have a team of doctors. I have to go in every year to have my heart looked at to make sure I don't have like mitral valve prolapse, and just there's a lot of stuff that goes on. Pregnancy is particularly rough.
Yeah.
And then like I have the like stretchy skin. I don't know if you can see, but it stretches pretty
Ooh,
far.
yes.
And maybe if I go like this, you can see like how far it goes. It's just I like to call it my people suit because it doesn't fit very well.
I love that. I'm totally stealing that. I don't know if I mentioned this when we were emailing Rebecca, but I was also diagnosed with that in my 30s. And it is exactly as you described. It took that long to actually get a diagnosis, because before that time, you're either not injured enough yet, or you just kind of get passed along, and it's a rare condition, right? So if you don't happen to go to a specialist that knows how to identify it, you could miss it. But I think that kind of brings up an important point, though, right? About, you mentioned something called invisible disabilities. Why is this considered an invisible disability? Yeah, heavy air quotes on that.
Yeah. I always put the quotes, and I put it in my book too, because right now we're still trying to change the language to hidden. So I'm like invisible, because it's not invisible. You can see it. It's just like, how do you see it? Like, how does it come out? Like that kid who's doing the contortionism or sitting like concave or with their legs, like the W position, you'll have your legs facing out, or like severely crossed or twisted, right? And it's just like that kid sits weird, or that adult sits weird. It comes out like how we sit or how we carry ourselves, how we walk, especially if you haven't had physical therapy to help you like learn how to do those things.
Right. Somebody to tell you, hey, stop doing that with your thumb.
Yeah. And so for the invisible, they're not invisible, but people think that it's invisible because if you just lined everybody up and you're like, all right, pick out who here needs accommodations. Not going to stand out. Not going to stand out unless you know what you're looking for. And then, things can be brought to light. So these hidden disabilities, in the end, it's just people who you would not expect, who have to tell you, hey, I need accommodations, right? And so that's either going to be something like internal, like a connective tissue disorder, or it's mental conditions as well. You can't see them. Well, sometimes you can see it, but like for most mental conditions, you're not going to just be able to look at somebody and be able to tell. Or neurological, like anything that you can't just see, right? Where somebody has to say, I need support in these ways. That's what a hidden disability is.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think a lot of times we forget about that. And sometimes people don't really understand why someone might be asking for an accommodation or needing something. So I guess they think you should be able to look at someone and know what they need, but that's not how it works, right? That's not it. We like to listen to people. So, in your new book, which is awesome, I was very excited to get to read it. You talk about another one of these disabilities called hyperphantasia, right? What
Yes.
is that all about?
So hyperphantasia, for me, with hidden disabilities come these hidden abilities as well, right? Because for every moment of your life that you're not doing things the way that's expected, you're doing it a different way. You're spending all of those moments, maybe every moment living differently than other people. And for me, that way that I live differently is hyperphantasia. Hyperphantasia is the ability to picture things in like so much detail that you can zoom in, zoom out. And so there's actually a test that they use for this, in which you're supposed to close your eyes and then you picture an apple, and you kind of have to get into it, but you have to like I got to close my eyes, right? And then so once you have an apple, it's like, does the apple have color? Can you zoom in? Does it have like imperfections? And then like, can you like flip it over and see the little thing? I'm sitting here working with an apple while I'm talking about this, right? I just lost myself for a second, but right, it has a little thing on the bottom, and I can put it down, and now I've got a cutting board on a table, right? And I get a knife, and I'm going to cut the apple, and inside it's like glistening. I can see there's like little red bits inside of the white. But the ability to like picture things. Now, you might picture a different apple. Maybe yours was green, mine was red, and it had some like green to it, but it had these like little brown spots to it. But I can zoom in, zoom out as I'm going along and interact with this. But that's kind of what's going on for me kind of at all times. I view everything in shapes. I see things like they come in, and I'm trying to describe these pictures that I see to be able to communicate. And so for people who are autistic, I'm autistic, and also people with connective tissue disorders, there was a study that was done in 2020 where they said they now believe that connective tissue disorders might be a subtype of autism. And so that's, where the research is. They still want to put more time into that, but that's where things are right now. And that doesn't surprise me at all. They think that connective tissue affects brain development. And so, right, so some people will get aphantasia where they see nothing. They can never picture that apple. Or some people are like, they get like a blob, or they get like, there's an apple, it doesn't have color, or they can't zoom in, or they don't even know what I'm talking about at all. And they kind of like, what is that even real? And then, right. But for people who experience hyperphantasia, they know what I'm talking about. They're like, right, because all those pictures that you got going on all the time in your head, right? And so, with the hyperphantasia, though, you have some specific characteristics that come out. The first one is that you have like an extensive memory, just an extensive, especially in autobiographical detail. Like you can recall things with just like, oh yeah, and then the lighting on the ground, because you remember how it all like was. And then the other thing is the ability to project forward, which would be like hypotheses or theories, or like if given these things, then what? And also just the creation of fiction, because it's like infinitely generative. So like I can picture anything that gets said to me pretty much, as long as I understand the words. I might sometimes be like, you're speaking jargon, I don't know what you mean, can you define that? And then I'll get the picture that, because to understand others, I have to be able to picture it as well. And so, yeah, these are the two major components that come in for a person who experiences hyperphantasia, but it also affects how I end up processing everything. Like this a bit hidden abilities thing, like I've been labeled a physics savant or whatever. I mean, like by two medical professionals, because I think in pictures. And so all I have to do is see a formula and then be given a test, and then I can just take the test because the formulas make sense to me, the shapes make sense to me. So I just need the formulas and the test, right? And so but that's because I think in pictures, and so it makes it very easy, and I can hold on to the formula because I saw it, and so I don't lose it as long as I'm like working with it. So
that's really cool. I kind of like the way you framed that too, where, you kind of said, okay, and with, some of these things that we call disabilities also come other kinds of abilities, which are really cool. Like, I think that's a great thing to remember. And I love the way in your book, you kind of depict that, sort of describing the main character who has this condition, and also in the illustrations, it kind of shows, how she may be experiencing, physically, some of the conditions, but also you kind of really show the creativity that comes along with it too. And I loved that. I dropped another link for the book in the chat so people can check it out. But do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of what went into that thought process of writing the book, and how did you want to depict hyperphantasia, and what did you want people to kind of take away from it?
So originally what happened for the book is I was sitting next to my stepdaughter. She was 14 at the time. This was a couple years ago. And we were talking about college because, she's going into high school. It's time to talk about college. And I was like, oh yeah, I have a degree. It's like in humanities, which is like writing. And she's like, oh, I've never read anything you've written. I was like, oh no. Like pull at my heart, right? I'm just like, how could I'm a failure as a parent, I'm a failure as a writer, how could I have never written anything for my children? And so I was like, oh well, I'll write a story for y'all. I'll write something for my kids. Yeah, why haven't I done that? What's wrong with me? And so I set off to write a story for my kids, and it started with a concept I've worked with dozens of times, just nonsense, like I've art and music and love songs and right, just the same concept that I had created at one point while meditating in 2007, right? It was one of those like moments where I was just like, I was trying to think about the furthest point in the universe, like whichever went the farthest, right? Like it had gone farther than any other point that's ever existed, right? And then I found it because I'm hyperphantasic. I found the point, right? And then I exploded from that point, giving every other point light and color and noise. And it was just this big explosion of art in my head, right? Just like of the universe. And obviously it doesn't look like the real universe, but it's just like the idea of it expanded in my head. And I've been playing with that concept ever since, right? So I was like, oh yeah, I'll use that to write my kids a story. That'll be super cool because I love writing about that. And then I wrote it and I was like, yay for me. I'm going to go get like an editor. And I went to Reedsy and I hired Jennifer Reese. She edited The Hunger Games and she took me on as a client. And the first thing she said was,
cool.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that cool?
That's very cool. It's really cool.
Yeah. And so the first thing she said was, okay, go to like Barnes and Noble or like a bookstore and pull books off the shelves and see, what's in print now, and then change or don't change your piece. It doesn't matter to me. And we'll start on this date. But of course, I'm going to take her advice. So I went to pull any book that was even minutely like my book concept, because none of them were as like abstract as mine was, because I didn't, right? The first thing I noticed right away is they all had a character. Mine did not. There was no character. It was called She Shines. It was about she, and there was no person. That like, it was just kind of like shapes, and they turned into other shapes, right? Like, because of course they were, because I'm hyperphantasic, so it's always shapes, right? But then I was like, oh, I have to create a character. I've never done that. So I Googled, how do you create a character? And it said, write what you know. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. What do I know? Autism, hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, pastoral orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, outside electric, right? I'm like, she has to go through all of that. Like, and I was pretty upset about it at first. I was just like, no, why would my little girl have to hurt like that? Right. And then so I started to like raise her in my mind, and it was so different than how I was raised, because she knew young. Her parents knew. In my head, like one of her parents had it, and they knew even when they were pregnant, like there's a chance, and so they were like, okay, whenever her GI stuff was all terrible right after birth, they were like, she's got it, all right, let's do the stuff. And then they knew what to do, and they supported her and took care of her, and they were able to do all these things. But then I realized, like, she would still have all of the conditions and still face them like all the time, right? Like it would happen in every moment of her life still. And so what would it be? And that's what I ended up with, was because the way that I have always done the shapes and the stuff like that, she'd be doing shapes, obviously. And what would the shapes look like? They would look like fun. It would look like her favorite things. Like there's all these, like for her favorite things, her special interests are space and art and zebras. Zebra is the mascot of EDS. So that's, a typical thing. And then with it, I hired an artist who could do the invisible disabilities and the story and, get it right. And so I managed to fit all of the symptoms into the depiction, mostly through the art, but also through the story, because it starts with her sitting there. It's, the sun is setting, she's night blind. So we go into her mind, which is what happens to me once it's dark. And we start off with seeing her memories. She remembers the sun. She remembers, like when she learned a fact about the sun, learned a fact about the moon, learned a fact about the stars. And then she was like, sun, the moon, and stars. And then what? And then we pop out into her universes. It's Eliza D's universes. And we get to see some of them in the
I
book.
love that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I really like that when you were going through this. Okay, first of all, I really like that your thought process went the same way mine would, where someone says you need to create a character, and then you immediately Googled, how do I create a character? This is something I would absolutely also do. So
Your neurospicy brain.
Yes, I feel so seen. And then I also really like that, the way you went with it was like, okay, I don't have to write about a kid having necessarily the exact same experience I have. I'm going to write about it in a world where they're getting support and people know about this and are aware, and people are able to be supported and have better outcomes. I think that's awesome. You're like writing the world the way you would like to see it.
Yeah. Another thing too that I got to do because of the way I did it is I was telling a story with a character. I wasn't telling a story about, like, right now a lot of the disability books are like, here is this person, or like I even had somebody who was like in a review or something, who was like, I just wanted to see the kids struggle more. And I'm like, why? Leave her alone. Leave my little girl alone. She's having fun in her imagination. Like, just leave her be, right? Because I'm showcasing the hidden abilities.
Yes, I love that. I love that you're showcasing that part of it. It's not just morbid and the kid struggling. It's like we have enough of that in real life. We don't need that. Not that there's nothing good to come out of books that describe struggle. Like, don't mean to suggest that at all.
Absolutely. And also I wanted to just tell my story that I was writing for my kids.
Oh,
that's really sweet. That's really nice. And well, and I think also too, like, on that point is that if you're writing a book from what you not just like, it's personal, you're writing about your experiences, but multiple perspectives on particular topics that are relevant to people that have invisible disabilities helps you frame your own experience in ways that can be positive and take something away from it. And I think that type of thing, like as someone that has ADHD, when I reframed it as, yes, I have a disability, but it also gives me a certain amount of empowerment for the things that do serve me with my ADHD. And I think stories like that help people be like, oh, I just have a different brain, and it's not seen as weird or like, oh, you don't think the same way I do, so there's something wrong with you. It's just that it's just different.
Yeah. Well, and so kind of speaking of that, what are some ways that people can support someone who experiences something like hyperphantasia? Like, what would you like people to know about what they can do?
Sure. Really, there's two things that I would say to start. Like, this is a good starting point is, so if you see somebody who is like, if they look like they're not there, right? Like I kind of look sometimes like maybe my eyes are not focused, right? I'm not here. I'm in my head. I'm gone. I'm somewhere else. Gentle out would be lovely, right? Like, let's say that you have a kid who has, like a hidden disability and they're gone, coming in and being like, what are you doing? Or like, I told you to do that 5 times or something, right? Like that. Nobody's trying to do that. Like, they're not like actively like, you know what I want to do? I want to check out right now. Like, it just happens. You don't really like, especially as a child, like the ability to control a mind that's just going like, and it's all fireworks or whatever it is, right? It doesn't even matter what it is. If you are trying to get through the coming through like hot and angry, that can be scary. It can be traumatic. It depends on, like, and people can get pretty traumatizing around these hidden disabilities because they're not lining up with what they were taught or what society says is supposed to happen or whatever. Like, the expectations versus reality aren't lining, and then there can be like some negative emotions that come in. But that's like working on yourself, because this kid doesn't need to be terrified because they weren't lining up with whatever it is that you thought was going to happen. Right? And so coming in and being like, hey, how you doing? What's up? Right? Just like, hi, do you remember earlier whenever we were talking about such and such? Yeah, that still needs to happen. Like, could you like, what do you need, like 5 minutes or something? Right? Like, right, you can kind of give some wrap up time. It depends on how they're doing, right? Another one though is like getting trapped in a scary place. That, because like, not every thought is great. Sometimes it can be absolutely terrifying, and so grounding techniques, being like, like, can you see 5 colors? Can you name 5 colors? Or like, can you feel the weight of your body, pressing into what's below you? Can you feel the temperature of your hands? All of these things re-engage the frontal lobe, because whenever you're caught in one of those hard moments, it's usually your amygdala has fired and you don't have control of your frontal lobe or your hippocampus, right? And so in that moment, though, if you re-engage the frontal lobe through grounding techniques, having them use their senses, that can get them out of a terrifying place that's like all encompassing, and you can see the like fear, or like just the like they're lost in it. And yeah, so bringing them back through grounding techniques, both of those are like pretty important.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's really useful information. Um, and it seems like that might be the kind of thing that could work for other conditions as well, right? That's a pretty useful tool generally, I would think.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
I love that.
That's one of my therapists introduced that for my GAD. So, and it has been an effective way for me to reduce the anxiety and the feeling of where you kind of disengage, and then it does help bring you back to a place of presence and reduce the stress that, because your body's in fight or flight. It doesn't, you've checked out. It's just like, I'm gonna panic. And it's so engaging in that way. It does really help with people. Like, I know for myself, I'm not saying everybody with generalized anxiety disorder, but it can help, having those techniques there to, more tools in your toolbox, as I always say. So
yeah. And I dropped the link in the chat for the Secular Therapy Project again. If anybody is listening to the episode and thinking, oh, you know what? This is reminding me of some experiences I've had, or know someone is having, seculartherapy.org. You can find a secular therapist and get help for whatever ails you, of the mental health variety, of course. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So you kind of, it seems like, Rebecca, you sort of have activism in 2 different spheres. We've talked a little bit about your activism around bringing awareness to hidden or invisible disabilities. And also, you're kind of well known in the atheist and secular community, as well as disaster response. You kind of do a lot of things. I shouldn't just say 2 things. You're involved in a lot. how do these intersect? Like, what is the reason that the humanist or secular communities should be thinking about disabilities?
So yeah, there's a lot going on here. So as far as me being, like involved in a lot of things, sometimes you see that in hyperphantasia too, because I can like I get bored because I have all this stuff like going on, and so to channel it into doing something, it's like great, I can do that, right? And so whenever I was in high school, I was in 11 clubs and an officer of 6. I won the Sandy Nininger Medal, which is the highest award Key Club International gives out for volunteer coordination. So like my background was already in volunteer coordination. I had donated like 350 hours my senior year, and then like racked up thousands of other hours through like coordination or whatever for the org. And so right, so I won that medal, but like, so that's my background is having these positions and building up things, and having volunteers do various volunteer projects. And so whenever I went viral, it's just like, well, I want to do my thing, right? I'm gonna do my typical, like what I'm best at, right? And so early on, for what happened, I had gone through the disaster thing, and so like creating a program that would go and assist in a humanistic way, because I actually had people come and proselytize to me in my home, which was traumatic, and I did not enjoy that. And I was like, you know what? I need to make sure that atheists are not trying to push non-religion onto people who they're helping, because they could be religious and it's just not the time for that. Just like let them heal, right? But whenever I went to look for a program, there was none. I was like, oh, I guess I'll just have to make one, right? Because that's in my wheelhouse, right? That's in my skill set. But over time, my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and all of my injuries and all these things have basically had me focused on myself and my growth, and trying to get a handle on things, trying not to be in pain, right? Trying to learn how to take care of myself, my family, and my community, but like trying to prioritize things. And so now I'm at a point where I can use the things that I've learned over the last, let's say I started when I was 33. So I'm at 8 years of experience in this area. And now I'm starting to, again, reach out to my community and be a part of it, and see, like share my knowledge and my growth. And hopefully other people will be able to gain things from it and continue their growth path as well.
Yeah, that's
But
awesome.
there was one thing I wanted to add, because you had on the end of that was the for humanists specifically. Also, I wanted to add that our community, I think, has a higher, from what I can tell from a person who remembers a lot of things, from what I can see, we have a high number of people with invisible or hidden disabilities. Like even in our poll today, it was 68% for a yes on, do you live with a hidden disability? That's really high. Like what,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
but also they had like there was this was in the past, and before they stopped using things like what is it, whenever the autistic community has higher functioning, right? Higher functioning, lower functioning.
Oh, yeah,
This
like
was
the levels
back,
of functioning rather than other
yes.
categories. Yeah.
Yeah, this was before
Mhm.
they rightfully got rid of that, right? But
Yes.
at the time, they did do some studies involved with just higher functioning, and one of them was about belief. And higher functioning autistic people were more likely to be atheist than the general public, agnostic than the general public, although agnostic atheist is a thing and they had them as separate things, but whatever.
It is
That's how
very
they were
much
doing
a
it back
thing.
then. And then, or just make their own thing up than the general population. And so, right, so inside of our community, we are more likely to have higher functioning autism than the general public, right? And so, and to run into these kind of things, and like specifically in our community, and understanding how to build around invisible disabilities is going to be a big deal, because we can't just use the playbook We're building something different because we're building with the people who are within our community, right? And so we can't go back and be like, well, how did all these neurotypical people do it? Right.
Yes.
And so instead it's, and how do you build a community with hidden disabilities? You got to talk to the people because they're the only people who know themselves, right? And they're going to have different abilities that they can bring into the table. It's like, how do we incorporate their different abilities while also accommodating the invisible and hidden disabilities at the same time?
I love that. And since you brought up the poll, I think now might be a good time to share the results of the poll. And you are exactly correct. It looks like it turns out your memory is good, as you described. 68% of people who answered the poll tonight said yes to the question about, do you live with an invisible or hidden disability? And that's a huge number because that's not 68% of the general population would not answer yes to that question. Now, of course, our sample is a little biased because people knew what the topic of tonight's episode was. So there may be a little bit of self-selection in there, but still, that's a large percentage. And we've had a few people in the chat even saying, oh, wow, I didn't know there were communities that had other people like me in them. And I think you're right. That's been my observation too. In a lot of secular spaces, you do see that. And so I love the way you're thinking about it in terms of let's incorporate our community into our community and make sure we're making it serve us. I love that. So yeah, let's see. The other questions were, do you or someone you know experience hyperphantasia? And 11% of people who were here tonight or who answered the poll said, yes, I experience it. And 3% of people said, yes, someone I know experiences it. And only 17% of people said no. 75% were not sure, which I think is a great answer because we're talking about hidden and invisible disabilities. Exactly. So good answer, folks. And then the other question that was not related to that, but I feel like a lot of the folks in our community are into some nerd stuff like D&D. So maybe it's vaguely related, but we asked what class of character would you be in D&D? And the most popular answer was wizard or sorcerer. Oh, well, actually the most popular was none of the above. And I'm not sure if that was because people aren't playing or they wanted to pick something different. Y'all can let us know. But Rebecca, are you a D&D player?
Oh yeah.
Excellent.
How would you answer several of these, but if I was to choose one right now, I've played a bard more than I've played a druid. I've played I've played other ones that are not listed here, barbarian, right? Like I was like some, dwarf man barbarian at some point. And right, I played a lot of different characters in a lot of different RPGs as well, because I started with vampire and I've done aberrant. Right? So yes, and others, right? And so yeah, yes. But bard is what I would go with tonight.
Awesome.
Bard buddies.
Yeah, y'all are on the same page.
Bard's best class. If you disagree, you're wrong.
I mean, I enjoy a good rogue. I'm just saying. I like to be sneaky and stuff, but I will accept your answer. Bards are fun as well. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing those so we don't get too far
I was
off.
a dragonborn bard for my longest campaign.
Last time I played a dragonborn, I was a fighter. But we can talk D&D in the after show.
Stick around for the hangout to talk about D&D and Baldur's Gate. Okay, that's great. Let's go back on track here. Okay, so back to what we were talking about. You kind of addressed this already, but I wanted to ask if you have any more comments on the topic of what are some specific ways that we as a humanist or secular or non-theistic community could be more inclusive of people with hidden disabilities?
So there's a lot that could be done, to be honest, but like, let's see, what's the way? I don't want to get too controversial, right? Like I'm trying to find the right words because I don't want to say I'll just say it the way that I was picturing it, because that's easier to get where I'm going. So like the cancel culture, I don't have a problem with with drawing boundaries and everything like that. But I want a rehabilitation culture. I want the ability to grow. I want the ability to change. I want the ability, of course, the person would have to like be able to acknowledge and, like do the growth or whatever. But, like providing more paths for that, because a lot of things that happen with somebody with a hidden disability is they get othered very quickly because they're weird, they're different. Often it's you get labeled weird and then you get tossed, instead of like, what is this weird thing? Maybe it's not bad, right? Because there ends up being like some type of like for instance narcissism. Let's go with narcissism, because every person is technically narcissistic to some extent, right? So if you have one instance in which this person is narcissistic and then you say that person's narcissistic, right, and you toss them, then you're not allowing for people to be human and therefore imperfect and therefore have some amount of like imperfections that they're working on, right? Like, what are they doing for their growth? Focusing on growth, focusing on like, yes, that is a way in which I wish that I were different. Like for me, something that I do is like, I will yell or, like I'll be like, ah, right? Like if they're getting like my children, if my children are getting very loud and I don't have my headphones, I'm like, stop, right? I should have had my headphones though. And I'll go back and I'll repair with them. I'll be like, hey, me yelling, I could have walked away, gotten my headphones. I'll try to leave headphones everywhere or whatever, right? Like trying to work with what I've got, where I'm at, where I need growth and stuff like that. Or cursing. As an autistic person, I started cursing when I was in 5th grade. And I remember distinctly the first time I ever said a curse word, right? And there's this girl, Devin, on her hands, right? She was walking on her hands and people were like, say it, right, on the bleachers. And then I did. And then I was like, oh no. And ever since then, whenever I am in a like autistic meltdown, like I gotta work really hard not to say curse words. And I'm so proud of myself whenever I don't. I'm like, I almost did, and I didn't, woo, right? But it still happens and I still work on it. And I still like, oh, nothing you could have done should have resulted in my behavior. And right. And so I don't know, accountability, acknowledgement, growth, those things, like putting like a higher, like, yay on doing those things and talking about those things. And I feel like bringing in like the rehabilitation culture, right, where we're talking about the ways in which we need to grow, or we're growing, or we're working on ourselves.
Ooh, I like that.
Mm.
I really appreciate thinking in terms of rehabilitation rather than canceling. I think that's one of the things that
I mean, boundaries are
not
important
just the
for
secular
sure,
community.
but like, hey,
Yes.
work towards your
Yes.
growth path,
Yes.
and
Yes, but it's like some things are worse than others. There are some things where, yeah, this is, maybe if someone engages in certain kinds of behaviors, I do not necessarily want to give someone another chance to do that again. But for a
yeah,
lot of us, okay, yeah, maybe I messed up. Like you said, maybe, okay, I got overwhelmed and I said a word I didn't mean to someone, or things like that. Like, we don't need to throw people away over, hey, they had an experience and reacted in a way that I didn't like or wasn't expecting. Okay, well, we can ask questions about what happened. We can do something different. And I like that.
yeah, working right with where it's these like small things. I feel like there's like some tendency to black and white things where it's like there's a lot of gray, and some of it's like Vanta black, and some of it is kind of like eggshell.
Yeah.
We don't need to Vanta black the eggshell. Like let's work with this gray area where we're working on ourselves and we're humans, where we are all trying to deal with whatever we've got.
Well,
Yes.
like I like to say, like, for someone that's neurospicy, it is not my fault, but it is my responsibility. And that's just what anything that if you like say a curse word and you didn't mean to, and it might have offended someone, you can say, I am sorry. I promise to do better in the future. Because I know that bothers you. And that is it. And you know better, so you do better. Thank you, Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Good advice.
Yes.
Good advice for Maya Angelou.
Thank you, Maya Angelou.
That's great. Okay, let's see. What do you have any more thoughts on that, or should we pepper you with more questions?
Give me another question.
Okay, I've got one. Why? Yeah, I've got one because they're written down right here in our notes. I Googled what should I ask in an interview. No, I'm just kidding. No, so something that I was thinking about as I was reading your book was how, how few other books I've seen like that, how we don't often see representation of kids with, kind of rare or unusual or hidden disabilities. And why is that important to have literature that shows that? Why is representation of that important for kids or for adults?
Honestly, it's important for them to understand the world around them and have more compassion and to be able to comprehend more than just what's inside of their very tiny bubble. Like, let's say that you have a child who never leaves like a certain city, but they have access to the entire world and all of the stories that can come in to their library or through books, and so they have the ability to see cultures, they have the ability to understand people and disabilities, and all of the differences that are a part of human beings, as long as it's written in their language. But you can also get like translations. I'm just saying that, there's limits to it. And also, I want children to be able to understand that this is something that goes on for human beings as well, and to keep that in their mind as they navigate the world and try to understand how to interact with others.
Good.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's really important. So it's for kids and it's for their adults as well, right?
Mhm.
Okay,
Oh,
so
definitely.
yeah.
So like the book, right? I'm autistic. I'm technically 41, but sometimes I'm a baby or a toddler or, a billion years in the future, and, all these other experiences that I have. And so as an autistic person, I can read the book and enjoy it because, um, I love children's books. I read them all the time, and I have my favorites, and yeah, but right, it's written for children, and also adults tend to have been appreciating it as well.
I love that. Yeah, and I noticed, spoiler alert, the flying spaghetti monster makes a little appearance in one of the illustrations.
Yeah. Yes.
Little Easter egg. Yeah. So before we switch gears entirely, are there any portions of the book that you would like to share with us or direct us to or tell us
Sure.
about?
I can just read the book, I think. I think
I
that I
would
can
love
just read
that.
it,
Yes,
right?
please.
Because why not?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
here it is. Eliza D's Universes. It looks like this is the angle I'm gonna have to take. And it's by Rebecca Vitsmun, and it's illustrated by Victoria Mickey. She's Ukrainian and she's amazing. Wait till you see, right? Here we go. Trying to be mindful of my actually, this is a copy that is not the nicer copies. Let me grab a nicer copy. I think this is one. It is also not. I put them all right here. I'll be back in like 5 seconds because you want the real art. Come on, right?
Absolutely. Yes. It's okay. We can fill time. In the meantime, I'm going to give a little spoiler for what we'll do after the book. I am going to see if we can share the real short, it's like a 1-minute video clip of the time Rebecca talked to Wolf Blitzer after experiencing a disaster. So we'll do that next. Stick around with us after the book. Okay.
So Eliza D's universes.
Yay.
Okay, so the front section is more for adults, but it says about this book. Like author Rebecca Vitsmun, Eliza D is autistic and lives with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and night blindness. This book depicts Eliza experiencing hyperphantasia as the sun sets and her vision fades. HEDS is a multisystemic connective tissue disorder characterized by generalized joint hypermobility, distinct musculoskeletal manifestations, and an array of comorbid conditions. Eliza's comorbid conditions are mast cell activation syndrome and postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Eliza's neurodivergence and physical conditions are considered invisible disabilities and are rarely depicted in literature. So we start here and we say, when Eliza D gazes into the sky, she finds a place to dream. She knows the sun is a star, always shining, even at night and throughout every storm. And the moon a sphere, no matter how much of it she sees, and stars exist far beyond the reach any telescope has ever captured. She knows so many things about her universe, yet when she thinks about what stretches beyond all that is known, Eliza D's creative mind speaks. Sometimes she's a pixie who lives in a kingdom between universes. Inside this kingdom, she jumps and dances, and when she wants a new place to play, she throws pixie dust in the air. From the dust, a beam of light appears and outlines a still darkened leaf. She kisses the leaf and colors billow as new land grows beneath her toes. Those colors unfold into mountains and lakes, while creatures that are any shape she imagines emerge. And through moments of her tiny planet's first dawn, she squints to find how far this new universe will go. Then she leaps with a bang as colors explode that bring shape and life to all the new things. Now that she can create any space she can imagine, Eliza D loves finding new spaces to be. Like a universe of spaghetti. Universe of flowers. Or a universe of dreams. And Eliza wants to know to what spaces you'll go, of what universes will you dream? And so the last page is more educational material. Let's see if I can get the picture to actually show up. There it is. And it says, while HEDS children often find the positions depicted in this book to be most comfortable, other children may also sit this way. HEDS patients would like the world to know bending your body for entertainment purposes, such as party tricks that move joints beyond a normal range of motion, can lead to long-term complications. That's Eliza D's universes. The back of it says, Eliza D loves astronomy and pondering the universe's greatest mysteries. Along the way, she discovers where science ends, imagination begins. And that's it. And I have a science video that's coming out next week. And so be on the lookout for that, where I prove my little sentence there.
Oh, where should we look for that?
Yeah.
Where can we find
It'll be
that?
on YouTube, but I'll put it on my Facebook and all my other social medias as well.
Excellent.
Awesome.
And we're definitely gonna share your links with everybody. So
It's
they
been
can
fun
follow
with that
along.
one. It's gone through a cosmologist and a mathematical physicist and a microbiologist, marine biologist, a pot of high school teacher, science teachers, and it passed. And one person, even, you know, in my giant list of other scientists who saw it, sent back a perfect, right, with huge letters. And so I'm really excited to share it with the world.
Yay, that's awesome.
I love that. Oh, I'm so excited for that. I can't wait. And I definitely dropped the link for the book in the chat so people can check it out. A lot of people are mentioning that they love it. And also the flying spaghetti monster was noted, as well as Rob has mentioned universe farting pixies.
Yes, I love it. I feel like it's a great one for our community. And man, is that not the cutest flying spaghetti monster you've ever seen? It's
He's
so
adorable.
cute. And then her
He's
with her colander
adorable.
hat. It's so cute.
That is super cute.
And it's available for request in libraries and schools because, like we said at the beginning, it got this Kirkus review, that's the librarian people, and it received a Get It in the awards and accolades, which, you know, that's rare. And so hooray, I got accepted into, I have on my website right now where you can order it for your local library.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, we were having a visit from Helen's Wine Fairy just a moment ago.
So
I love that. I am
Yeah.
so excited that that is available in libraries and that there's a way to request it in libraries. That is fantastic. And I did also drop the link for that in the chat. So if anybody here is an educator or a librarian, is that who makes these requests, or how can anybody
Can. If you have a library card, you can go to your library's website. Most of them are done through the website. Even if you go to your library, they'll be like, oh, you can do that on our website. It usually is suggest a purchase. It's often under services. You won't just be going to your card catalog because your library probably does not have my book yet, since it just became available for libraries recently. And so but you can go to your library's website, find the suggested purchase, and then my website has all the details that you need to fill in those blanks.
I love it. Okay, I'm gonna be checking to see if it's at my library.
And also right now it also has 5 stars on the critic website. Hooray, after the first 20 critics reviewed it. So that's exciting too.
I love that. Well, it's really good. So I'm glad it got good reviews. Okay, so let's see. We're getting close to time to do Q&A, but I want to switch gears a little bit before we do. But first, is there anything else that you want to mention about the book or about hidden and invisible disabilities?
So also on my website, if you just go RebeccaVitsmun.com, very top of the page is going to be my educational materials. Inside of that, I wrote a 55-page document for the artist to include all of these different hidden, but you can see them, disabilities. And so if you would like to know how those things are depicted, not only do I have a list, but I also have links to the science involved in each of the things. And so if you'd like to go and learn more, or you resonated with any of it, you can go and click on those links, learn the science, and also learn more about other people as well. So
awesome. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I hope a lot of people will be sure and do that. So, okay, we are gonna go to Q&A here in a minute, but we did promise that we would share the time that you talked to Wolf Blitzer after a disaster. And do you want to like give us a setup? Tell us like what happened. This is how you like told the internet and live TV that you're not a believer, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so here's the setup, right? My house was destroyed by a tornado, and I actually used physics to escape. I never actually said that, but it took me a long time to process what had actually happened. But because I'm hyperphantasic and because I am a physics savant, right? I've been labeled that now. I could picture exactly where the tornado was and how much time I had. And I knew I still had time to drive towards the tornado to get out of my neighborhood. Barely. Right. I barely, but I knew that I could do it. I believed in the math, right? Isn't it so funny? It's like the thing that I believed in was the math to get out. And so I believed in myself, and I made it 3/4 of a mile outside of the destruction zone. I got out and looked, and it was just a wall, right? It was like this wall of black. And I remember being like, well, where's the tornado? Is it like in front of the wall? Is it behind the wall? And no, it's kept moving. And then it became like smaller. And I was like, oh, that was it. Oh, okay. Because it was 1.5 miles wide and I was only 3/4 of a mile outside of it. So it was like, you're right, it was everywhere. But yeah, and after it moved, then I went back to try to rescue my cats, who went under my bed, and everything crunched down and they were safe. And I got to take them to Washington with me, and they lived out their kitty lives. But
good.
right, so I had just done all of that with my 19-month-old, and whenever I came out of the front door, it was hailing, and the week before we had hailstones the size of tennis balls, right? And so I was like, I had set up an iReport account for those tennis ball size hail on CNN because they had those iReport accounts, right? So I took a picture of my husband at the time holding these tennis ball size hail, and so I had that account already. Well, that night I posted those pictures of what happened in my house onto the iReport. And it was like, I was in my bathtub until it was 5 miles away. Then I panicked and ran. Here's what happened to my house. And then I got contacted by 2 different CNN programs, actually, because one was like a Trapper, and then Blitzer, right? And then they fought about it. And Blitzer won. And that's how I ended up on a show at all, is because the both of them were like, oh, we both wanted the same guest. And Blitzer's like, well, I want her. And then that's where I went. And so, right, they were like, yay, this is a really uplifting story. Mother saves child. This is really uplifting in a terrible time, And I was like, yeah, I have nothing to do. I mean, I'm a stay-at-home mom with no house. So sure, I'm available for sure.
I like the contract. I'm a stay-at-home mom with no house.
Right?
That's great.
Right? I was just like, well, I got nothing going on, obviously. Like, I don't have any toys. You know what I mean? I don't have anything. And so it's just like, yeah, I'm available.
I'm available.
I'm available.
Right. So I went to the interview, and while I was there, Cade, not Cade, it was Andrews at the time. I have a son now who's Cade. And so I can't, and he's little. And so Anders and I were there, but they set up in front of a bowling alley. So my son is yelling, balls, 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 like over and over and over before we're supposed to go on this program. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be terrible. Right. I was just like, right. And then at some point he needs to nurse, and I'm nursing in Wolf Blitzer's rental car, and like he comes to chat, and at some point Anders and he are talking, and he's like, oh, Anders is really talkative, and I was like, yeah, he repeats a lot, and and he's like, oh, that's really cool. And so they interacted a little bit. So then we're about to go on, he's yelling balls again, and then they're like, oh, let's give him this dummy microphone. We'll just turn it off and maybe that will work. Fingers crossed. And then it did. So throughout the whole interview, Anders is holding this dummy microphone so that he doesn't shout balls all the time. And then he's interviewing me. Well, he goes for a close, and he thinks to himself, like, what do I know here? And he goes to have Anders repeat after him, because I guess he thought it would be cute or something. He's like, Anders, say, I'm Anders and this is CNN. And then Anders goes, right? And it's like dead air on CNN. Like, it's just this kid who's not, right? It lasts too long. And then, so Wolf's got to like save it And he's like, well, we're glad you're here. And, you know, you got to thank the Lord, right? Do you thank the Lord for that split-second decision? And right? That's not a yes. And also I'm on CNN. And so like, I would feel really weird if I was like, no.
No.
What do you do? Like, right? I'm just, nah. Right? I don't know what to do. So I'm just like, I'm actually an atheist. Right. And I laugh because it's like so funny. Like he didn't see that coming.
No,
Right?
this interview did not go
How would
the
he
way
have seen
he
it coming? He
planned
wouldn't
at
have asked
all.
the question if he saw it coming, right? Like, so like the level at which it was not expected. I just laughed in his face. And then like he's like shuffling. And then I said, you know, we're here and I don't blame anybody for thanking the Lord, right? Because I didn't. I'm like, if people are happy that I'm alive, cool. Like, that's cool, whatever.
Yeah. But
And so
yeah.
then, yeah. So I well, the interview ended and then his producer came up and I was holding my kid. She grabbed both of my arms and she shook me and she goes, you're gonna go viral. And I did not even understand what she was talking about at all. I thought, well, it was a sweet story, but I don't think it was that great, you know? Right? Because I'm thinking about the whole like tornado thing, you know?
Yeah, you're like, I guess, you know,
yeah.
people have survived tornadoes before, but okay.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, yeah, it was sweet or whatever. And then I, you know, called my at the time husband and was like, hey, so at the end, like they asked like a weird question because he asked me if I thanked the Lord, and he's like, oh my gosh, what did you say? And I was like, well, I said I was an atheist. He's like, my grandparents were watching that. Because we were both not out. My husband, like his family didn't know, my family didn't know, friends didn't know. Like I had told other atheists at atheist meetups specifically, but I barely ever saw them, right? Because they were like local. I had to drive, all this stuff, right? And so, right, so the two of us had to face it suddenly together, but it went well.
I'm glad it went well, and you didn't have any like really bad backlash. And
well, once I got home, I had already had like 1,000 friend requests, so the lady was
that's so great.
So it kind of it got you noticed, it sounds like, by a few other humanist and secular organizations as well. So, you know, well,
yeah, and I went and sought them out too, because right, once I was working in my house, and then the people like, you know, like proselytized to me, and I was really upset about it. I was like, I gotta make sure we're not doing that, right? And then I was like, yeah, I did get to utilize the voice that I had to be able to work with the community.
I love it. Okay, well, should we play the clip for people?
Sure.
Anders is
Brian, he just Brian.
Yeah, Brian, you like Brian, huh? That's your dad. But we're happy you're here. You guys did a great job. Yeah. And I guess you got to thank the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Do you thank the Lord for that split-second decision?
I'm actually an atheist.
Oh, you are? All right, don't thank the Lord. But you made the right call.
Yeah, yep. We are here, and you know, I don't blame anybody for thanking the Lord.
Of course not.
So.
Hey, all right, Anders, want to try one more time?
But I love that, because and I hope that was also kind of a little bit of a moment of realization for Wolf Blitzer as well, to realize, oh, I'm walking around with this assumption that this is a really obvious, safe question that I can end my interviews on, and of course everyone will agree to this feel-good thing, and that's not the case. So I love that he walked into that, and that you were in a place where you felt comfortable enough to answer truthfully.
You know, I'm kind of always in that place.
Sure there are people
that I feel like my autistic filter is like, you know, I'm like, right, like I'm way more likely to just say whatever and then deal with it. You know. Yeah, actually, I've been told that they teach that moment in communications classes now, like as a instance that proved the rule. Like, you can't assume who you're talking to ever.
That is excellent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. And I mean, that's a great learning moment for anybody. And I mean, I know I've said, silly things when I'm interviewing before, so like no shade to Wolf Blitzer, but that's a great whoopsie that happened to be on live TV. But I am really happy now that it's something people are learning from, and that's the example. Like, hey, by the way, there are people who are secular, and that's a normal way to be, and they're not walking around with scary looking masks on eating babies. They're regular people. Here we are. I love that. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and your work. I think this might be a good time to move to Q&A, unless you have any final thoughts you'd like to share before we do that.
No. If anybody wants to learn more, just check out my website. I've got all kinds of things on there.
Awesome. Okay, and I will drop your links in the chat as well while we do Q&A, but let's get started on some questions first. We do have a few questions for you. Let me pull those up here. And again, we'll get through as many as we can before we wrap up. If we don't get to everybody's questions, stick around. We'll talk more in the Hangout. We'll see if Rebecca is able to stick around with us or not, but we'll be here regardless for the Hangout, so we can keep talking afterwards. But okay, let's see. So do you want to do the first question, Helen?
Sure.
Okay.
What would your advice be to people with invisible disabilities who also struggle with imposter syndrome?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So in the end, like, I can't imagine any of us could actually be imposters because we're just ourselves, right? And so you're going to have with your hidden disabilities these abilities, right? And utilizing them as best you can, that's your value as a person. And honestly, like, what I like to do for myself in times whenever I can't really do much of anything, because there's times where I can't even move my arms, right? I'll get in, my neck will be injured and I will be in bed and I can't do anything. And I like to imagine myself as one of my animals or plants. And I'm like, do I deserve to be at least treated as well as I treat my animals and my plants? Because I love them, right? And I think about how much I love my cats, and I think about, like, what is my value add as a person? Is it at least my cat? It's way more than that. And so for a human being to have imposter syndrome, it's like, you're a human being. You are filled to the brim with abilities, like, and value and worth. And so I think just learning to see yourself that way is the thing that helped me, because I did experience imposter syndrome. And just starting to understand that my value isn't connected to what I can do. Just like being here and being a human being and being alive, like, even that is of value and worth.
I love that. And yeah, we have talked about that a lot here too with imposter syndrome. I can't remember what it was last week or the week before. I think in the Hangout we were talking about that. And it seems like that's a thing that people in almost every community, every profession, every condition seems to struggle with. And I think maybe the takeaway is you're not an imposter.
You're not.
Unless you're really
There's
an
no
imposter,
way.
in which case, that's on you. But
You're infiltrating the CIA or whatever.
Okay. Like, if you're wondering, am I an imposter? Like, you're probably not, right?
Yeah. I doubt it.
It's like I always say, like, if you're questioning if you're a good parent, then you're probably a good parent, because you're worrying about, like, am I doing this correctly, and am I raising good kids? And I feel like for those of us that are neurospicy and that,
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I was just, that question, just right, it hit me right away, just like bang, right? The worrying if you're a good parent, it's just like, that's a growth question. You're already growing if you're asking yourself what you're doing wrong. People who don't grow don't ask themselves that.
Yeah.
So if you're like, am I an imposter?
That's true, because that is not a growth mindset.
Yeah, I think even imposter syndrome could be evidence of a growth mindset as well, because you're like, But do I
Oh,
really
yeah.
have a place telling other people anything ever? Like said no person like who wasn't
Yes.
valuable. Like your
Yes.
concern over it
Yeah.
is already growth.
Right. Yes. If you're wondering, should I be speaking on this? Like, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And, yes, probably yes. And you're in a mindset where you're also ready to learn and hear new information from other people. You're not walking around thinking you've got it all. So I love that. Okay. Let's go to another question. We have another one where someone is asking, they said, I've heard of something called executive dysfunction. Do you know what that is? What does it look like? Is that one of the hidden or invisible disabilities? And if it's not something you're familiar with, that's okay too.
So executive dysfunction actually comes up in a lot of different conditions. It's like more symptom related than it is its own thing. And so my husband and I both spouse it's for y'all, I can say the right word, my spouse. A lot of people sometimes they want me to like cage it or whatever. So when it comes to his executive dysfunction and my executive dysfunction, we both have it from different places. His comes from ADHD, mine comes from autism, and the way we experience it is different. What it is though is like essentially this ability to plan and like accomplish like tasks and like get it all like done, these like routine things. And so it'd be like taking care of yourself and your environment and all this other stuff. Right. I'm not as familiar with this one. I do know that mine comes in from a hyper focus and his comes from like a scattered focus, but we're both focused on things that are not like, I'm going to get up and then I'm going to brush my teeth and then I'm going to whatever it is. I do have a morning routine, but I'm still working on it. I have an app called the Finch app. I love it. It's the only way that I can actually take care of myself regularly because I have this check boxes and it's just like, okay, I did it. Yay. And so for people who have this executive dysfunction, having ways to deal with like having a body, being like a human and not just a brain in a vat, which I would totally be if if my humanity would let me. But I am
Yes,
stuck in this
please.
meat suit instead and need to do all the meat suit things. And so yeah, getting those done for me, I have executive dysfunction because I can hyper focus on one thing eternally. And then my husband has it scattered focus. There could be other ways. I'm not sure.
For sure. Yeah.
I have it as an ADHD person. Yeah. And the way it's, as someone that experiences with ADHD, usually people that are neurotypical are able to plan things in pattern. Their pattern ability is at a higher functioning than those of us. And it's engaging that prefrontal cortex. And they're able to plan ahead. Like if they say, I'm going to, get my kids to school, then I'm going to come home and like clean my car, and then I'm going to go grocery shopping, and they check off the list. Someone that has executive dysfunction, like myself, will bring the kids to school, get home, and then start cleaning the car, and then they'll open the glove box, and then they'll see there's a bunch of papers that they didn't get to go through, and they start going through that, and then it triggers another thing that they forgot to do, and they're like, oh, you know what, my insurance card, my new one is on my desk, let me go get it. And they walk into the house, and then they look at their desk, and their desk is a mess, and then they start cleaning the desk, and it's very scattered. It's hard to keep that executive functioning going where you complete the tasks. With people that have like ADHD, like the way the mind manifests is that you start a task and you intend on finishing it, but then if you don't get your brain to go, I was gonna, work on cleaning out my car. You have to, instead of you just starting and ending, your focus moves around so much that the task never gets completed, or it gets completed in a very haphazard way. that's an example of like how executive dysfunction is,
And
and
it's
basically you have to engage your prefrontal cortex all the time, consciously.
Yeah. And another one's
So it
the
sounds like
time dilation, or right, like there's like a loss of time, or the ability to plan how long a task will take, like underestimating to overestimating. You could be like, yeah, I can accomplish 5 things, and then it's like, okay, well, you can only actually do 1. Or you say, oh, I can only do like, oh, I can't do that, would take forever, but it takes 5 minutes or something, right? Like there's just like not a solid grasp on the time that it takes to do something, because you're not accounting for the ways in which your brain is going to derail you. Or for me, just like unirail you, like, right, like where I'm like, oh no, I just spent 5 hours on this thing and I'm hungry because my brain didn't send me the food thing and I wasn't paying attention to the time. You can like lose yourself.
So it can definitely be individual to what someone's particular circumstances are. It sounds like it can be a lot of different ways. Interesting. Okay, so we've got more questions. Do you want to do one, Helen?
Actually, I want to go a little bit of a combination of the atheists and the hyperphantasia. Did you non-believers do non-believer, I'm going to take out the you, do non-believers with hypophantasia once imagine the universe with God, then after you stop believing, do you now imagine the world without God?
Yes, I was voted most likely to be a nun, as in N-U-N and not N-O-N-E, which I became in my CCD class when I was 17. And so, yes, definitely. I also remember crying when I was 14, whenever I was like, I'm going to go to hell. And it was like, why would you go to hell? Is like my friends. And I was just like, because I'm not sure, because I have doubts. And they're like, you're fine. You're definitely not going to hell. And I was like, no, I think I might. So definitely I started to walk back on the Nicene Creed first, where it said, we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And I was like, well, I don't believe in just one church. Baptists are okay. That's where I started. And then after that,
it was like slide from there.
Yeah, well, it was like saints. I was like, why am I praying to dead people? I can just pray to God. And right. And then it just became more and more until I just became quiet and just like listening and confused teenager at church, where I was just like, is any of this real? And then I got a degree in humanities so that I could study comparative religion, because I was going to find the right religion. That's how I went into it. I'm going to find the right one. And then I walked away an atheist, upset because I got a degree in nothing and BS. And I was like mad about it, right? But now, hey, whatever.
That's
like,
great.
yeah, I'll just professional atheism.
I mean, it seems to be working out. So
yeah. Well, at the time I was very frustrated because this was 2005. This was like before the God delusion and all that. Like, right. I had deconverted back in 2002 was whenever it started. Like, whenever I started, like, okay, thinking of myself as I wouldn't use atheist in my mind, but I would think I'm not a believer anymore. And then, yeah. So.
Oh, yeah. And that can be a period of time that, for different people, like that can last a really short amount of time, or, I mean, that can go on for years for some people, right? Being in that kind of, well, I'm not really sure, but now what?
Yeah.
That's a
I would try to find stuff on it. Like I tried to look into deism, and I tried to look into like, just all these things until I finally was like, no, these are stories, and I don't want to sit here and bounce my reality off of archaic stories to try to figure out what to do. I'm just going to do my best. And right, I don't want to like try to filter what's happening through a book, because that seems kind of muddy. or any books, or maybe all of them. Maybe I can just like take them all and like play with them and be like, what was great about this? What was terrible about it? What has ruined the world? What have people gained? And then just like navigate with what I can. And so, yeah, that's kind of how things came about for me.
Okay.
There
we go. That was weird. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Our couldn't get
screen
off
went away for a second.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's I think that's always interesting to people to kind of hear when our guests come on and kind of describe their own experience and how their thought process was and how they work through things. It really is kind of an individual, personalized process, and I think that's really helpful for people to be able to hear, all the different ways that it went for different people. So I'm glad you were able to share that. And I think that would be a good time to go to one last question that kind of ties it all together. Someone is wondering, do you think that many of these invisible disabilities contribute to an individual becoming an atheist or free thinker, possibly due to difficulty fitting in with the norm, thing like that?
When I look at what it is and when I consider what I really believe, when you have the higher functioning autism, a lot of these people have high IQs. And so I think that the ability to question is more likely in those scenarios. And I think if you get an ability to question, then you're going to end up questioning. And so some people have less ability to question. And so I don't think that it's more of like because of how they're treated. I think that you could be treated perfectly well and still come out with questions because you are a questioning person. And I do think that that is on the ability spectrum. And maybe people are lower on that ability than others. And some people are higher. And so I would say that my ability to question is incredibly high. And so no matter what kind of background, I think that you can arrive at atheism, but I do think it's more likely in our community due to like the prevalence of the ability to question.
That's a great point. I know that was something I always used to get in trouble for too, but I think it's a good quality, even if it is, sometimes gets us into trouble too.
Here.
Okay. Well, yeah. Go ahead. Well, on that note, I think we can start wrapping up. We'll have some final thoughts from Dr. Ray, and then we'll go to our hangout. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your awesome book with us, as well as your experiences and your mentor adventures. It was great. I loved all of them. And I know we've had you for a while now. Do you think you'll feel like sticking around to hang out with us, or do you need to log
I think
off? Totally
my
up to you.
spouse can probably come home and hang out too. I think he's probably the Nathan he him on here. If he's listening, hey, come home.
Hey. Love it.
Yeah,
okay, well, yeah, feel free to stick around as long or as short as you'd like. And yeah,
I'll just
we
make
can
sure that I
take a break
text
too, so
him, and then,
don't worry.
Yeah,
about
you
that.
can get up,
I do
get
need
to
to
the
drink some
bathroom, get a
water.
drink. It's
Yes.
yeah.
We will not hold you here. Okay.
Oh, we should do the poll one
we'll
last
start
time,
wrapping up
right?
now then.
Second time for the poll.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Because
So
I wonder
yes,
if
that
anybody
is
realized they
sometimes we
experience
do.
hyperphantasia or.
That is a great question. Yeah, so sometimes we do that. We launch the opening poll a second time to see if anybody has changed their answer on anything. So we can absolutely go ahead and launch that. So
and while you guys do that, we can go through our closing spiel. Per we do every week.
Yeah, we'll do that too. So I have relaunched the poll. So it is the same questions as they were at the beginning. And if you weren't here for the beginning, it's okay. You can still answer the poll now. And so the questions are, again, do you live with an invisible or hidden disability? Do you or someone you know experience hyperphantasia? And if you were a D&D character, what class would you be? So we'll leave that up for just a minute while we go through our closing remarks, which are, don't forget to join us next week. Same time, same channel. We're here every Monday. Next week, we have Durante Lamar talking about building secular community. The following week, we're going to have Mary Byler. Her talk will be called My Savior Comes to Thee. And then we have several more very excellent guests lined up, including Rob Palmer, who's going to be talking to us in August about Are Humans Actually Special in the Universe? So stick around for those. We're here every week. And don't forget to follow us on the social medias. We are on Facebook. We have a main Facebook page as well as a Facebook support group page. We are on X. We're on Instagram. We are on TikTok. And many of our recordings of previous RfRx episodes can be found on YouTube. And just search Recovering from Religion and you will find it. Now, in addition to that, Helen, how else can people get involved?
Okay, y'all. Those of you that have been here many weeks, or those of you that got some free time and looking to do something beneficial in the world, you should consider becoming a volunteer with Recovering from Religion. It really helps in the healing process. I can say myself, I know Cara can say, and all of us that do volunteer with RFR, that part of our healing comes with volunteering because it gives us meaning and purpose, and a meaning and purpose that we choose to participate in. It's not a passive experience, it is active. And what we do is that you go to our website and you fill out the volunteer application. Now, all the services that we mentioned at the beginning are all done by volunteers. Nobody is getting paid. As I like to say, we are making all the atheist money, which is none, zero atheist money. But we always need volunteers. And also, like, you don't have to be face forward. Like, we have the agents that when you call into the hotline or, go into the chat box, it goes through the, help people, talk about their issues and feelings and offer those resources and support. That's there too. Run support groups, or, those of us that do this podcast, or if you're the type of person that is like, oh, I'm really good with tech stuff. I'm really good with website building. I'm very good with community building, whatever it is that you want to do more behind the scenes stuff. We would appreciate that too. We need people to edit these videos. So if you are a good video editor and you're looking for something to do, we would love your help.
Yeah, we have to apologize to our video editors for this one with our lag issues. They're usually less work.
Yes.
But help us. We need help.
We do need help. So please consider filling out an application. I can say that I've been volunteering for coming up, it'll be 4 years in November. And I love volunteering for this organization. So I highly recommend that you fill out an application and become one of our wonderful people in the RFR family.
And you can make cool friends like Helen, and
I'll make
hang
you
out with
20%.
them at their house.
You can come hang out at my house. And I will give you food and we'll talk about D&D.
And puns. We do puns.
We do puns too. Yes.
Okay. All right. That's enough from us. Dr. Ray, would you like to bring it on home with?
I will bring it on home, I guess. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us tonight. This was eye-opening in several ways for me, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, my brother may have had that. And he's 2 years younger than me, and he's had joint problems and other things so much throughout his adult life. And yet he used to be really athletic, but he could do contortionist kinds of stuff when he was a kid. I mean, he could put his I won't say, but he could do all sorts of crazy shit. And we just said, oh, you're double jointed. No, I think that was not the right diagnosis for the time. Anyway, that I had never even thought about that until you just started. So I'm going to get on the phone as soon as we're finished here. I'm going to talk to him and say if he's ever had a diagnosis. I doubt if he has. But several things that came up tonight, and I want to say this, that there is some research, and it's pretty solid research. I can't cite it right now, that within the atheist community, there is a very high percentage of neurodivergent people. way, way overrepresented off of the normal population. And it does seem like, especially people that we, used to call high functioning autism are way overrepresented as atheists. So that's pretty common knowledge. I belong to Oasis here in town, and 100 people come there every Sunday morning, and I dare say 20%, or at least 20% of the people there, maybe more, are clearly neurodivergent. But we all get along really well, and it really is interesting to watch how the various strengths. I really like your strength, your ability focused approach to this. I guess I'd really never put the flip side of that together. But I think that's an interesting way to start reframing it for myself even. Anyway, I can go on and on. I want to say that you guys have already talked about volunteering, but I would like to mention that we have the fall excursion coming up in September, and now is the time to get your registration in and get planning on how you're going to come and have a great 3-day weekend with all the other RfR folks and many of the volunteers. And you'll see some of the very faces you see right here, right now. Helen and Kara will both be there among other people. Anyway, thanks for coming tonight. Thank you, Rebecca, for talking to us and opening some new avenues of thought for me personally.